So you all know the story. In the 1960s, Ford tried to buy Ferrari, was eventually turned down at the last minute, and in a fit of pique created the GT40 to break Ferrari's dominance at Le Mans, which it did, taking first, second and third place in 1966 and winning again in 1967, 68 and 69. Fast forward half a century and Ford wants to go back to Le Mans 50 years after that first victory. And they figure they'll do it with a Mustang, except, well, they start to develop the Mustang and realise it's too big to be fast.
So, knowing a Mustang was not going to work, they went away and created this. It is the GT. You join me inside it. Actually, the whole Le Mans plan was canned, and about 20 engineers thought, why don't we just work on a car with nobody looking? So they did. They went away, they created this car, they took it to Ford's management and said, look, when we go back to Le Mans, why don't we do it in a bespoke, new Ford GT? This is it.
When we approved this program, we did it to come race here at Le Mans, and I think we proved it was the right decision.
The reason the car was created was to win this race. 50 years later, after the infamous 1, 2, 3, and we did it.
It was designed as a racing car. Does that mean it's slightly unfair? Does that mean there's a slight sort of, not cheating going on, but you know, most GT racing cars start out as GT road cars. Aston Martins, Ferraris, Porsches, they all have a proper cabin. They all have a normal underpinnings. This car does not have normal underpinnings. You can probably hear that from the fact that it is so bigging loud, and I'm only doing 47 miles an hour out on the road. This carbon fibre tub has an integrated roll cage. You can't do that with a normal GT car. It was built in when the car was designed in the first place. It's got what they call a keel running along the centre, and that means that all the strength is along the middle, and the suspension's lower wishbones are really low. They stretch all the way over to the front, so the suspension mounting points are really close to the middle. That means there's loads of space either side of them to work on the underfloor aerodynamics. So from the very start, this car was designed as a race car and a road car, which gives it a massive advantage on a racetrack, but also means, I'll be honest, it gives it some slight compromises as a road car, because you are always slightly aware this is a car that wants to be going rather faster than it is. Behind me is a 3.5 litre V6 twin turbocharged engine. It's from the EcoBoost engine range. 60% of it is common with the one you can buy in a Ford Raptor. That means it's incredibly compact too. So they've just taken this really narrow cabin, they've moulded it around the engine at the back, and that makes, from the front section at least, and from an aerodynamic point of view, the GT incredibly aerodynamically efficient. In this guise, street trim, that 3.5 litre V6 makes 647 horsepower. In the sort of endurance racing regulations, they have a thing called the balance of performance, which means some cars are allowed a bit more poke than others so that they end up about the same top speed. In race trim, the Ford GT, which has won its class at Le Mans, makes less than 500 horsepower because, quite frankly, it's just too fast for its own good. I'll tell you what though, surprise number one, after the fact that it makes that real, honest, gruff, guttural noise. It's not a rich, vibrant sound like you get from an Aston or a Ferrari or even a Porsche. I like it. It sounds really powerful. It's a real proper, honest, Fordy kind of noise. And this car does get on. They claim 0 to 60 in under 3, probably 2.8, and a maximum speed of 216, I think. So it is quick. It is quick in a straight line. Revs to about 7,000. There's a real kick at about 5.5, and it absolutely takes off. But other than that on the road, the most astonishing thing about it is the ride is brilliant. Really unbelievably comfortable. So here comes some more race-derived trickery. On the road, I've got two springs doing things. I've got push rod suspension. And part of the push rod is a torsion beam, so that's spring number one. And then that hooks up to another coil spring, that's spring number two. When you go into track mode, which is hydraulically done, and it does it very quickly, the entire ride height drops to 70 millimeters. It drops by 50 millimeters. The wheels just disappear up into the arches. and it hydraulically locks out that coil spring. So your only springing then comes from the torsion springs. That means that the spring rate instantly doubles. So this goes from road car, that's unbelievably refined when it comes to ride comfort, to track car, where the ride is totally tied down. Totally tied down. In an instant. And I do mean in an instant. It's also got a nose raising thing. You think, right, I'll press the nose raise, and you hear an electric motor whir somewhere in the distance, and up it goes very slowly. This, because it's got the hydraulic systems that run the hydraulic power steering, the hydraulic damping, and run the spring locking, it just lifts it just like that. There are 3 damper modes. They're passive dampers, but you can select them through 3 different comfort modes.
Right, now the GT's fancy DSSV dampers, created by Multimatic, which also builds the whole car incidentally, they put themselves into a firmer mode too. Technically, these dampers are passive, but that does them a disservice because they have 3 different states with a different stiffness in each. And they are used by half of the Le Mans grid and the Red Bull F1 team, these dampers. They have funky springs and valves inside them, so the damping rate can vary, just passively, not actively, okay? Look, they're just clever.
I mentioned it's got hydraulic steering. That's heavy, it's quite a lot of self-centering. It's quite a nice system, it's about 2.5 turns lock to lock. But when you're on the road, and as you turn and as you press on, what it doesn't do is take on any more sort of mid-corner weight. Now, a lot of road car engineers like to engineer more weight in when you start leaning on a chassis, so that it feels like you've got something to lean on, it feels like you've got something to lean against, and it gives you more valuable feedback as a driver. This doesn't do that, and because it doesn't roll very much, and because it generates astonishing amounts of mechanical grip, I mean off-the-scale levels of grip, you just have to slightly trust that it is going to do what it does. On a racetrack, and look, here I have to apologise, I'm driving it on the road talking to you, I'm not on a racetrack talking to you, because if I was on a racetrack going fast talking to you, Ford would insist there's somebody sitting next to me, and it's all a bit elbowy, and you don't want that, and I don't want that, so I'm going to tell you what it's like. Bloody brilliant is what it's like. It is so fast. It is so adjustable. It is one of those cars that, despite having bags and bags and bags of power, you can get in it and you can feel comfortable to press on really very quickly indeed. But you are always slightly aware when you're driving this car on the road that track performance, let's face it, that race performance slightly defines it as a road car as well. And I don't mean this in a bad way, slightly limits it as a road car as well. It cannot be all the road car it could be, because it is a racing car too. It can't be like the 2005 Ford GT, which it was a bit of a pastiche of the original, but it was a great road car. By contrast, what it is a great track car and a, frankly, quite brilliant racing car. Does it matter? I don't know. If I was Ferrari or Aston Martin or Porsche and I made GT road cars and then went GT racing with them, kind of in the spirit of the regulations, I might look at a Ford GT and think, oh, you know what, that's a bit unfair. They've made a racing car and then eventually got round to delivering some just in time to meet the regulations to their CEO and the other boss at the end of last year. Now customer deliveries begin in earnest. They're going to make 1,000, they're 420,000 quid each. Eventually they're fulfilling the requirements of the regulations that allow it to go racing. But it is first and foremost a racing car. Take nothing away from it as a technical achievement because of that. This car is a mega piece of kit.